we're learning about the Nisa Hamayim. We're learning about the pouring of the water on the Mizbeach. And the Gemara, we are on 48b3. 48b3. As you know, one of the mitzvos of Sukkot, besides taking the lulav and the etrog and the dasim and the aravot and sitting in a sukkah, another mitzvah, a biblical mitzvah, was the pouring of the water on the mizbeach. And the pouring of the water on the mizbeach, the question, the special halacha Moshe Sinai, you poured water on the mizbeach. The question is, why were you pouring water on the mizbeach? So the Mishnah says in Rosh Hashanah, so one approach is, the Mishnah says in Rosh Hashanah, that B'chag, on the holiday of Sukkot, we're judged on water. And because we're judged on water, Hashem wants us to be successful. Because he wants us to be successful, he tells us to do certain mitzvot that are connected with water, and that would be great merit for us to be successful. So therefore, here the mitzvah is totally water, pouring water on the Mizbeach, and that merit, Hashem should give us a great year of water. Now, the Ran asked the question, what do you mean? Weren't we already judged on Rosh Hashanah regarding Parnasa and how much water should be for the world? So he answers, the Ran says that yes, on Rosh Hashanah, there is a general judgment how much water will be for the world, but how much water will you have of that? How much parnasa that you will have, that individual, for that each individual, that was judged on the holiday of Sukkot. And therefore, you should know the lulav, the etrog, hadasa rava, are agricultural products, as we know. And, some of them, obviously need a lot of water. The Gemara mentioned to think about the etrog, how it requires a lot of water, right, Max? And therefore, that type of item that requires a lot of water that you do a mitzvah will serve you as a great merit. And you should know, Hashem wants to set us up for success. You're going to see in this week's parasha, Max was talking about the parasha, you'll see that Hashem says certain things I don't want you to do. I don't want you to bring an animal with a blemish, kilola ratzon. Certainly, he said it's not going to be accepted. Meaning, I want your offering to be accepted. I want you to win, right, David? Hashem, God wants us to win. So he wants to set us up for success. So he tells us, don't do this, do that. So the same thing is here, he wants to set us up for success. So he tells us to go ahead and take these products, and these will be a great merit for you. David, is it clear? I miss you in the front seat, David. Okay. So the Gemara says the following. No, Ralph wants you next to him. Okay. And this is much better than box seats in the ball game. Okay. So Tana Rabbanan. We're now, as we said, we are now 48b, 48b3. Tana Rabbanan. Kol ha'olim lemizbeach. Olin derech yamin. When you get up to the mizbeach, when you get onto the altar, if you look at the picture, they have a very beautiful picture. You see the diagram of 48b3? Do you see where those arrows go? So look on the right side, the arrows going up, right? David, you see that, Ralph? Max? So when you go up in the Mizbeach, you're going to the right, and the arrows are all going right, and you go around. That is the general way that they would travel on this Mizbeach, encircle to go around the Mizbeach. Say that again? Right, that would be the center where the fire is exactly, right, the middle of the Mizbeach, right. And so you go to the right. That's the general thing, and therefore that's why you see also when the Sefer Torah comes out, how do they walk the Sefer Torah? Right, if the Sefer Torah would be coming out of here, would we go this way, or would you go this way? We go which way? We go to the right. That's the general. Okay, they got to put the arrows. Okay, Sometimes you put on the ground, right? Put the arrows on the ground. Which way to go? The same thing when you put the Torah back. You also, if the Torah is coming back, which way would the Torah hit? The Torah is coming back. You're going to go ahead and you go this way. You go to the left. You go to the right. Right? But again, the Torah, we finished. Meaning, we finished the reading of the Torah. They pick up the Torah, and which way they walk? They come this way, and then they bring the Torah back. That's how they do it. So you're always going to the what? You're right. You'll check that up, Ralph. You're going to check upstairs.
So if they go to the right, then they skip everybody that's inside of the shul.
So those people could go over to the Torah and read it, right? So upstairs in the bima upstairs, also that's how they go back. They go back to the right. You come down to the right, they go back to the right. That's the general rule. And the Gemara says there were 3 exceptions to this rule. And this is how they did it by the Mizbeach. So usually he would always turn to the right. But if you look at diagram B on the right side, you see what's happening? Which way is he going? You see diagram B? He's going to the left. Instead of going to the right, he's going to the left. Now because he has to get to that corner over there on the left, that's where the bowls where they would pour the water on the mizbeach. As we said, the Mishnah said that there were 2 bowls. One bowl for the pouring of the water, and one bowl for the pouring of the wine. So there were 2 bowls. They don't show the bowls in this picture, but that's what was there. And they wanted to minimize the travel. But imagine if you have to go around the whole mizbeach to reach there. If you think about it, let's say the mizbeach, one side, it might have been 28, let's say 28 amot by 28 amot. So let's say it was 50 feet. If you would be going around, you'd be going 50 feet this way, 50 feet that way, 50 feet this way. You're gonna be. It's nice traveling. And what's the problem with all the traveling? So the smoke that's on the mizbeach, that smoke could invalidate the water that you're holding in your hand. The water gets smoked up, or the wine gets smoked, and that could invalidate. And therefore, in order to limit the amount of time, not that you're going to go all around, make a nice trip, get your exercise, therefore we tell you in these specific cases, you go ahead and you go right to the left. And this is, by the way, the source of going to the right is learned out from a pasuk in Yecheskel that indicates the idea of going to the right, which if you look in the picture, going to the right would mean going eastward, right? You see, going to the right in the picture, you'd be going to the eastward, and that is where you're supposed to be going. Some have other psukim that there are different psukim that are brought down, and where do we learn this law from? Now, so the Gemara says, "Chutz," except from mina ola l'shlosha, again, kola olim l'mizbeach, olim derech yamin. Anybody who goes up to the mizbeach, they would go to the right, and then umekifin v'yordin derech small, and then they would go and they would come down, would be to the left of the ramp. The way you see, they go up to the right, and then they come down on the left side. But chutz mina olela shlosh dvar ma'alalu. But except the person who goes up for the following 3 things. She'olin derech smol, they go like in diagram B, they go on the left, and then mechozrim ala ekef, and then they just come right back down. You see how the arrows go? They go. It's not that they go all back around the other way, go all the way around. They go right up to the left, and then they just turn back and they go right down, right? So the reason why they went that shortcut, they didn't go all around and they didn't go to the right, was because of the smoke. And these are the three things: the elahain, nisach hamayim, the pouring of the wine on the mizbeach, nisach hamayim, the pouring of the water, nisach hamayayin, the pouring of the wine, and for olo tarof, and the carbon ola, the certain when they had the certain bird that was supposed to be totally consumed on the altar, when there were too many birds on the east side, therefore they would go to that side. So if you look at the picture, right? So again, the Ola Sa'of. So we'll explain that. We'll explain the Ola Sa'of in a minute. If you look at note number 28, Ralph, what do you want to say? So I'm saying I think it's huge. It's around 20. It could be 20. I have to look back at the Gemara. It might be approximately it could be 50 feet. 50 feet by 50 feet going this way, 50 feet going that way. Because I think one size is around 28 amot by 28 amot. 28 amot could be 56 feet. It could be 40 something feet. It's a large amount, right? So if, look at note number 28, 28, where it says, by the smoke, the water and wine might absorb some of the smoke. And if it absorbs some of the smoke, that will, remember, there was always a fire burning on the Mizbeach, which Rav Kook has a beautiful idea that every person has a fire inside. You got to always feed that fire. You got to constantly feed that fire. So that the morning, the fire is on the Mizbeach, always burning. So there's always smoke. So that would be the issue with why we want to minimize the exposure of the water and the exposure of the wine to smoke. So therefore, we give them that shortcut. And what was the story with the Ola Sa'of? What's the story with the Ola Sa'of? You know, the Kohen David had to one day he's going to keep make his nails very nice and sharp, right, David? The Kohen, you learn about the Kohen would keep his nail very sharp, and actually he would use his nail to actually, a bird is not such a large animal, and he would use it to cut the siman, the certain parts of the bird that would be the way the bird would be killed instead of using a knife, which is the general it's called melika. Many there's a kohanim called Malik. If you know the name Malik, it's a kohen. We have in our neighborhood Malik, because the word melika, when he uses his nail, very sharp nail, it serves as to kill to slaughter the bird, and usually the malika was done on that right corner. If you know in the picture, you go to the right, which would be the southeastern corner, right? And if there were too many, if there's too many, there were a lot of birds they were busy, a lot of kohanim taking up the area over there. So instead of going to the right, they would go to the left. Now they would go to the left on that southwestern corner, and they would do the malika. They would do it over there. Now, what's the problem with the bird? Go all the way around. You see, when you did it on the southeastern corner, you see this very short walk to the southeastern corner. That corner, right? Immediately when you make the right, correct? Max, you with me? And you're right there. But if there's too many kohanim there, so you should really go around. But we're not going to tell you to go around. Why not? Because the bird might die from the smoke. And we can't have the bird die from the smoke. The bird has to die as a result of the act of the Kohen, of David, Mr. Cohen. And therefore, you minimize the walk, and that's why he goes in that fashion. Okay, so that is
I do understand, like, if we're going to the right, that it's heading east for that initial step, once you get on top of the staff. But then, when you're doing the complete circling, you'll be heading back north, you'll be heading west, south, you're facing all directions.
right, but the pasuk indicates when you're making a turn, you're turning towards east. Initial turn.
Why do like some synagogues now, like, we should generally try to face east? Succah would facing east, but other synagogues sometimes you're facing west.
Right. So those synagogues, the general, those it's supposed to be facing east, facing Eretz Israel, Israel. Those synagogues most probably were not originally built as synagogues, most likely. See, if you look at the Bialystok synagogue, or even Tzemach Tzedek, they were built not as synagogues. The Bialystok synagogue was built as a church, and what say they converted it into a shul. They, you're not allowed to sell a shul to make it into a church, but obviously there's ways to take a church and make it into a synagogue. The Tzemach Tzedek was a building, it was built as a building, and maybe now the question is, can they turn? Would they be able? Is there a way to turn it around and to move it? I remember a shtibel in Brooklyn, and for many years it was a house, and they wasn't in the right direction, and a new Hasidic Rebbe came in and he turned it around. He was able to move things around, and he actually made it towards east. But a lot of times when the building is not made as a synagogue, not to make it fit properly, sometimes it's very hard. So that would be the reason why many of those shuls. But when you're going to be building your shul, Max, you're going to make sure it's proper directions to the east.
In those schools where the geography is like not purchased, like our own is on the west side. Why don't we turn around down east?
I think it's not respectful to turn your back to the Aron Kodesh. Presume that would be why we wanted to. But certain people actually will tilt a little bit towards. They actually will remember Rabbi Ram would move towards, instead of being directly, I remember him downstairs in the downstairs shul, Minyan, he would be going like that a little bit to make sure, because you want to be a little bit more eastward. You're welcome. So now the Gemara says that which is for Olasov Kisha Rav Taba Mizrach. There's too many people bringing the korban. Good morning on the east side, and then they would move to the west, southwestern side, to that corner, and they would go ahead and they would bring the olah, the korban. Okay, the Mishnah. Now we're continuing the Gemara. Ella shahiyah mashchirin. We said that the bowls were dark, were black, meaning one opinion says they were not made out of gold, rather they were made out of cement. But why were they dark? They were dark because of the wine that entered in the bowl. So the Gemara says wine, if you pour wine in a bowl, that wine will actually, with time, that will darken the item, the color of the wine. Ella Shemesh Bishlam, the Gemara says, I understand the yayin mashchir. I understand that the wine would darken the bowl and make the bowl dark. The maya my mashchir. But why would the bowl? There's two bowls on top of the altar. There's one bowl for the wine that they would pour the wine libation in, and there was one bowl for the water. So I can understand the wine bowl becomes dark. But what about the water bowl? The water bowl, we're not talking about Super Bowl here, right? The water bowl should remain clear, remain light. Why would it become dark? So the Gemara says, Kivan Damamar, the rabbi said, what happens if you made a mistake and you poured the wine in the water bowl, it's still valid. It means mistakes happen. People, what kind of mistake? This wasn't a big mistake. Kohanim are usually on top of their game. They don't make such mistakes. But these bowls, the fact that this bowl is only used 7 or 8 days a year for the water libation, it's not something they did every day. So I presume there was possibility, and the bowls are right next to each other. So which one is which? They look at the bowls look exactly alike. Which one? The only difference is we'll see about the hole on the bottom of the bowl, but therefore they could make that mistake, and they could pour into the wrong bowl. And we said, if you made a mistake, you pour the water into the wine bowl, or the wine into the water bowl, it's still good. So the water would also become black. Now, I'm thinking the following. It sounds like because you were Yotzei, you get credit even if you didn't do it right. That's why the water bowl became black. Meaning, if the Kohanim would know, if the law would have been that if you pour into the water bowl the wine, you would not be Yotzei, the Kohanim will never make the mistake. That's what I want to suggest. The Gemara, why could the Gemara say you made a mistake? You can make a mistake. That's how it became black. The Gemara says, since if you pour the wine into the wine into the water bowl, you are yotzei, you get credit, it could become black. So sometimes in life, when you know that, if I make the mistake, the world's not coming to an end, that's how you make mistakes. When you know what, I could go 5 miles over the speed limit, it's no big deal. You go 5 miles over the speed limit. If you know I'm going to get a ticket if I go 5 miles over the speed limit, you're not going to go 5 miles over the speed limit. So that's the idea, perhaps, with the Gemara. I want to suggest that idea. It's only because you will be Yotzei. The Kohen knows in the back, David knows in the back of his mind that if he makes a mistake and he makes this mistake, he'll still get credit. So then once you know that, so you might not be on top of your game as much, because I still won. I still get credit for the deal. But you know what? You need to do it the right way, even if you get credit. What? Right? You didn't do it the right way. I was once in the shul in Baltimore, and the rabbi of the shul, the Agudah, is Rabbi Heinemann. He's the one behind the Star K. The Star K supervision. You ever see the Star K? And in his synagogue on Yom Tov, I was there for a Yom Tov, and let's say today was Shabbat. They make an announcement, and today is Shabbat, but tonight is the second night of Yom Tov. So what's the idea? There's a law that says you need to have you're supposed to have a nice appetite for the holiday meal, right? But if today would be Shabbat, I'm supposed to eat Sudah Shlishit today, correct? So the law states, eat the Sudah on the earlier end of the afternoon. Eat the Sudah, let's say start the Sudah before 9 hours into the day. Let's say on a day that starts at 6 a.m. ends at 6 p.m., before 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's pretty early, right? So they made an announcement, Sudah Shlishit cannot be after 3 o'clock. That was the announcement in the synagogue. So I went over to the rabbi. I went over maybe to the rabbi, and I said, the one who made the announcement of the shul, now obviously he said you can't have the meal after 3 o'clock. But the law is, we know the law is that you're allowed to have the meal after 3 o'clock. You're supposed to, that's not the way to do it. That's not the lachatchila. That's not the ideal way to do it. You shouldn't have it after 3 o'clock. But if you didn't have it before 3, you can have it after 3 also. So, but the Gabbai, good morning, Mark.
Morning, Rabbi.
Mark, you're coming in. I'm in the middle of telling a story.
Okay.
And it's an interesting story. The story goes when we were in Baltimore, Maryland, a number of years ago, for a certain holiday. It was the holiday of Sukkot, and it was Shabbat. And on Shabbat you have to have Sudah Shlishit. But that night was, let's say, the second night of Yom Tov. and you have to have a nice appetite for the Yom Tov meal. So the halacha states that l'chatchila you're supposed to have your meal, your Suda Shlishit, earlier in the afternoon. Let's say 2:45, whatever it was. And the Gabbai of the synagogue announced you cannot have Suda Shlishit after 3 o'clock, after 2:45, whatever it was. So I went over to the rabbi and I said to the rabbi, they announced that, but the truth is that if a person did not wash before 2:45, he still will wash afterwards. Just don't overdo it. Have a small meal. So I'm afraid that people hearing the announcement, they're going to think they can't go ahead and have a meal after 2:45, but they could technically have that Suda. David, is that clear the case? Do you know what the rabbi told me? He made a great impression on me. He said, we are lechatchila Jews. That's what he told me. What does that mean? Morning, Jack. What is lechatchila Jews? Meaning, he was defending the person who made the announcement that we do things, ideally, this is the way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to not have the meal after 2:45.
Right.
So the fact that he announced that you can't have the meal after 2:45, it's not inherently wrong, he was saying, because that's not what you're supposed to have it before 2:45. I still personally disagree. Ani hakatan, and I say still they shouldn't make the announcement in such a fat way. But they made the announcement that way because they want people to do things the way you're supposed to do things. You're supposed to do it before 2:45. That's what the halacha states. But the halacha also states if you can't do it before then, for whatever reason, you can do it afterwards. So that's the idea. So
It was like a tie out. They could have put an asterisk or like in the announcement saying exactly what you said.
they could have said you should do it before 2:45, but if for some reason you didn't do it before 2:45, you could still do it. I think that's what they should have said. But what's the problem? The problem is the following. Once you know that you could do it after 2:45, if you didn't do it before 2:45, sometimes that becomes your lechatchila. Sometimes you already rely on that, and you already
Right. The majority of people will say, "Oh, I can do it whenever I want."
then people say do it right, even though the law states you really should do it before 2:45. So that's where we get into the issue, and that's the same thing here with our Gemara. The Kohen would make a mistake. It would seem like the Kohen would make a mistake and possibly pour the wine into the water bowl, because even though he was supposed to pour the wine in the wine bowl, but because if he made the mistake, he still gets credit. Perhaps that's why that mistake could be done. Okay, that was the chidush I want to share. Okay, umunukavim kemen shnei chotamim. The bowls that we had on top of the mizbeach, they had holes, and they were like two. It was like two nostrils, and one hole was thicker than the other hole. Why? Because they wanted that by the time the water would finish leaving this bowl, and by the time the water would finish leaving, the wine will leave the other bowl, it would be synchronized, that they would be at the same time. So at the same time, or they would come out. Not only that, they wanted that the coming out of the water and the coming out of the wine should be simultaneously at the same time. Now, the Gemara says, and some say there were actually two different Kohanim, that one Kohen poured into this bowl and one Kohen poured into the other bowl. That's how some say. Now the Gemara says the following: Lema matnisin Rabbi Yehuda hi v'lo Rabbana. Let us say that the author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda and not the Rabbanan. Now, what is the issue, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbanan? The question was, how much water did they pour on the Mizbeach? We know when it comes to the wine, there was 3 lugim of wine. We said a lug could be around 12 ounces. So 3 lugim of wine would be around 36 ounces of wine that was poured on the Mizbeach. But when it comes to how much water was on the Mizbeach, that was a matter of dispute. The Chachamim hold it was also 3 lugim of water, exactly match. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, "Bilog hoyemenasech kol shmona." Rabbi Yehuda says it was a third of the amount of wine. It was only one lug of water that was pouring on the mizbeach. So the Gemara says that it makes a lot of sense if you have only one lug, if you only have one lug of water, and you have 3 lugim of wine, so it makes sense that the wine hole has to be wider than the water hole if you want them all to come out at the same time. So by making the wine hole wider, that would ensure that it'll take a little, it'll be faster, and therefore you could get 3 lugim would come out simultaneously, that 1 lug of water would come out, being that the size of the hole is larger by the wine. The E Rabbanan, but according to Rabbanan, they're the same size. They're both 3 lugim. They're both, let's say, 36 ounces. So why do you need to make the hole wider for the wine more than the water? If they're both similar amounts, identical amounts of liquid coming out. So the Gemara says, "Afilu temer Rabbanan." You could even, it's no proof. The Mishnah could even go like the Rabbanan, that really there was 3 lugim of water and 3 lugim of what? Exactly the same amount on weight. There was exactly the same amount of ounces of water and the same amount of ounces of wine. But you still needed to make the hole of the bowl for the wine larger, wider, because the texture, the way wine is thicker, and because of the density of the wine, because of its thickness, it doesn't come out as fast as water, and therefore you got to widen that hole. The Gemara says, "Chamra samich," wine is thick, and maya kalish, and maya is much thinner by nature, much more fluidy, so to speak, whatever expression is, and therefore you need it to be more wide by the wine than you need it to be by the water. And the Gemara says, "Hachi nami mistavra." It's logical that our Mishnah is in sync with this opinion. That our Mishnah holds that what? That really was the same amount of wine, same amount of water, like the Chachamim. Why? Because the Rabbi Yehuda, because if it's Rabbi Yehuda that says that it was 3-to-1, it was 3-to-1 wine to water, Rachav v'katzeh islay. You would use the language, you would use a different language in the Mishnah. Not that one hole was thick and one hole was thinner. Rather, you would say one hole was wide and one hole was narrow. You would use a language to indicate a greater disparity between the two. If you're dealing with 3-to-1, so then you would have to go ahead and you have one lug of water and 3 lugim of wine. You would have to go ahead and say an expression that indicates a larger hole for the wine to come out. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braita, Rabbi Yehuda, when he says his opinion regarding the wine and the water, he says, Shnei kasvaot hayisham. There were 2 utensils, meaning 2 bowls on the altar. Echad shel mayim, 1 bowl was for water. Ve'echad shel yayin, and 1 bowl was for the wine. Shel yayin, the wine bowl, was piyad achav. The hole was wide. But the water bowl, shel mayim, piyad katzat, was narrow. Kedei shiyu shnehem kalim b'batachas. In order that both liquids should come out simultaneously at the same time. So therefore, the language would have been Rachav and Katzah, Namuva Vedak. The language of our Mishnah, which used the language of thick and thin, would seem to indicate that it's not such a tremendous difference between the holes. It's not such a big difference, and that's because they were both 3 lugim, exactly the same amount of liquid, except because the wine takes a little slower to come out, got to make it a little bit more thicker, the whole of the wine. Shmamina. So that's what the Gemara wants to rest its case. That's the proof regarding that the Mishnah is the Rabbanah's opinion that both on the wine and the water was 3 same amount, like David says, 3 lugim. Now, at the same time, right? That's a great question. What would be the reason for such a Max, that's a good question, needs to be looked into. What would be the reason why they should come at the same time? It could be that the 2 mitzvot, maybe even though generally we don't do mitzvot, we don't bundle mitzvot up at the same time. We don't want to look like that it's a burden for us. But here we're doing perhaps the merit, morning mark, the merit of having those both mitzvot simultaneously, perhaps is a big deal, because every second that you're doing this mitzvah, the other mitzvah is being performed. And also, perhaps there's an idea of, what each represents, the symbolism. Water represents, perhaps you could say the water represents the service of Hashem. What's the idea of water also? Water is something which is not expensive. Water is something which is free, and don't go after a thing that doesn't have a real taste. And maybe there's a message between the wine and the water, because here it's the Chag Asif. It's the holiday of gathering in all the crops. It's the time period that a person brings in. He got the money in the bank, and Hashem says at that time, I want you to leave your house. Go out to the field, go out, make a sukkah. Don't get caught up in this world, and the world is more temporary. Just like if you don't last forever here. So don't get caught up in it. So perhaps there's an idea also, the water, which also represents the idea of what is it? It has no value. Costs nothing. Used to be water costs nothing. When we were growing up, water costs nothing, right? Today, water costs money. So the idea is you could serve Hashem. Judaism is not about how much money you have to serve Hashem. You serve Hashem. But technically, I gave you a mitzvah. It costs you nothing, just water, and maybe there is some sort of idea you could connect with the water, and compared to the wine, which represent something else. Also, you could talk about water is Torah is compared to water, just it's a lifeline for the person. The wine represents also the secrets of the Torah. Yayin is sod, yayin equals secret. So maybe there's some sort of connection between maybe the Kabbalah, the hidden Torah, the revealed Torah. So maybe there's a lot of ideas we could try to think about why the water and the wine should come at the same time, that contrast. Okay, have a great day, everybody. See everyone tomorrow. Mark's doing recruitment.